with an introduction like that from Cora, you all don't need me to speak. But I say thank you, Cora, for your fine words. It's truly an honor to be here today. And Dean Peter, I'm not going to attempt your last name. Kathy, and the organizers of the Justice and Law Lecture Series, community members, students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would first like to recognize my Liberian community. They are here. I didn't know they had Liberians in this very cold place. I would also like to recognize the migrant community in Maine. I hear it's a growing community of Africans, Asians, and people from everywhere. So welcome and thank you for being here. I would like to use this time as an African and as someone who had been a refugee before to say thank you to the host community for taking in these people, allowing them to share your space, your resources, your time, your energy. As we always say, God is going to reward you for the good that you've done for them. So you too deserve a round of applause. Usually when I come to speak in different parts of the US, especially during the winter, I pride myself in the fact that I bring some colors to the city. But Kathy, I give you the award tonight. When I saw her, I went, shoot, she beat me to it. I'd like to again introduce my kids. Arthur and Amber, they sacrificed their spring break and all the sleep privileges associated with it to accompany me first to Harrisburg, then to Nashville, now to Portland. We got up at 4 a.m. this morning. It was 4:47. We had to leave the hotel and catch a flight by 6:20. We did it, got ready in 13 minutes, got to the airport, and we were able to get on our flight to come here. But during the flight, I saw their heads bubbling and going like this. So when we got off the plane, I said, now at least some people will show some appreciation for what I do. Because I think it's a lot of work. Last week, as Cora indicated, the global community celebrated the 57th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. The theme for this year is Ending Violence Against Women, a Time for Action. There were many compassionate speeches, beginning with the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, urging the world to end violence against women. The Secretary of State, John Kerry, also gave a very good speech, a speech about the need to end the violence against women. In his speech, he also mentioned his two daughters. Both speeches from two of the most powerful men in the world re-emphasized that no nation can thrive without the full contribution of women. As beautiful as these words were, they failed to give specifics about justice and the fight for justice, specifically as it relates to ending sexual violence. Tonight, we will have a conversation about justice and rule of law for women victims of sexual violence. And I think you're going to leave from here more confused, and that is the intention, because you would now want to go back and research and research and research and get engaged in this fight here in the US and in the global community. In 2004, less than a year after we ended our mass action protests, my kids were in exile in Ghana, and I lived alone. The Minister of Gender and Development at the time called me and said, Leymah, we have someone that we want you to kindly take home. Because at that time, we did not have safe houses in Liberia. So there was this 10-year-old girl that I'm going to call Mary, who was a victim of repeated rape at the hands of her grandfather, her step-grandfather. She came into my home, and she was a very inquisitive child, but she was so skinny, weighed less than, she weighed, she had the weight of a 3-year-old, bloated stomach, very pale, and then as they did her medical check, they realized that she was also sickle cell patient. She called me auntie, and at night we would put her in her room, and in the middle of the night when I got out of my room, she was lying in the hallway on the very cold floor, because she said the heat came from within her body and made it very difficult for her to sit on a chair or lie in a bed. And she could only find comfort when she stripped and lie on the very cold floor. She dreamed that she would get well and go back to school. And in the morning, sometimes when I used to be getting ready to go to work, she would come in my room and say, "This is a very nice dress. When I grow up, I'm going to dress just like you, auntie. I'm going to go to school and I'll be like you." She had so much dream for herself. In 2003, December, disarmament fell apart in Liberia, and we sent a group of our sisters to go into the camps to work with the ex-combatants. And these women came back really sick, upset, because they had encountered some of their rapists. And we decided to do our circle that we call shedding off the weight, because we realized as women, even as we did the peace work, we carry all of the dirt, and we never really had a space, or in our communities, no one created the space for us to exhale. So the circles that we made was the space where we could talk. And I had worked with these women who was around that table, around the circle for like years. But one after the other, as they told their story, most of these women told stories of rape. In that room, there was a mother and a daughter. In that room, there were 2 women who were inseparable as we did the protests. They would come together, live together, eat together, drink together. No one could separate them. They knew everything, or thought they knew everything about each other. And then one stood up. Instead of turning to the group to speak, she turned to her friend and said, "I was raped. I was raped by 5 soldiers." And the friend started crying. And she stood up and looked at her and said, "I too was raped, but I have been so embarrassed to tell you because I felt you would think less of me." The mother of this child, a young girl, stood up and said, "I was raped. And the way I was raped, my 2 sons were made to hold my legs as the soldiers raped me. And when they finished, the soldier asked one of the boys to take off his jacket, and they used it to clean themselves." And the daughter started crying. She said, the mother said, "The soldiers came to our house because someone had told them there was a young girl in the house." And she turned to her daughter and said, "Because you were very ill, we decided to call the neighbors to take you away." A neighbor volunteered to take this sick child. The parents were so happy that she was not around when the soldiers came, and the reason they raped the mother was because she failed to produce the young girl. And the mother turned and said to her, "I don't mind that I was raped. I'm glad that you did not have to go through the ordeal." And this little girl could not stop crying, because the neighbor who came and said he would protect her raped her several times over, even as he took her to safety. In December of 2012, Olivia, a young girl who is now, unfortunately, the poster child of underage rape victims in Liberia, died of medical complications she developed as a result of the rape she experienced at the hands of her uncle. Cora spoke about the Nobel Women's Delegation to Liberia. During our trip to Totota, we had conversations with the women, and in our conversations, we wanted to know what were some of the issues that were affecting the growth and development of girls and women in their community. And they say rape. But we know we've always had rape because this is one of the ills of the Civil War. But the kind of rape that we're seeing now, babies as young as 18 months, is disgusting. They told us that they have 5 cases on the docket, and that the one involving a young child had not even gone to court. The stories that I've just told you is not just a Liberian story. It's not just a Liberian problem. Rape, abuse, and sexual violence have become a serious threat to the lives of women and girls from DR Congo to India, to Pakistan, to South Africa, to Somalia, to the US and parts of Europe. Girls and women on a daily basis continues to be targets of sexual violence. A few years ago, maybe two years or 1.5 years ago, a group of young girls met with President Sirleaf. And as they engaged with her, one after the other, one of the young ladies stood up and said, President Sirleaf, is it possible to put video cameras in our schools? Because rape and sexual harassment and abuse is the biggest threat to our accomplishing or achieving the level of education that we intend to. The question we keep asking ourselves as activists, as mothers and daughters in communities, how did we get to this place? What can be done? Can there ever be justice for these victims? Will this menace ever stop? Can we ever have a world that is civilized, void of rape and sexual abuse? And most times, as I play it in my head and think about it, I sometimes try to come up with answers. You know, I have this crazy thing I do when I'm driving. I talk to myself. I say, praise the Lord, they have something called hands-free, because when people see my mouth shaking, they won't think I'm going crazy. So when I'm driving, I talk about these things. I try to do analysis. And one of the things that really come to my mind and continue to be a burden on my heart is the over-sexualized nature of our world. When you turn on the TV, everything is sexy. Last night, I told this story to the group that I talk with, that a few months back, my sister and I were just chilling out in New York. And I was flipping through the pages of a magazine. And I got to this page where this nicely sculptured young man was lying, and he had on only a pair of white briefs. And then next to his thigh, very close to his private, there was a watch. And apparently, this entire advert was the watch. And then I turned to my sister and said, Sash, tell me something, because I'm from Africa. Is there a new way they wear watches in the US? Because I could not understand the correlation between a naked man and a watch on his thigh. And he wasn't an amputee. I'm sorry, but as crude as it sounds, I could not help but ask that question. Young girls and boys are made to feel that the only way you can get by is if you're sexy. Our daughters are taught that your body begins from your breast and ends down to your thighs. There's nothing about brains. In schools in the US, young children in other parts of the world are so drawn to porn. At 10, they're on their iPhones watching sex and sexy things. You know, when you get to the place that I've gotten to, I have so many sisters in the movement that I tell people I have Chinese nieces, American nieces, black nieces. And so sometimes when I engage with my young American nieces, and they're talking about things, and because I'm such an African, I'm shocked. One of them told me they went to a naked party. I said, a naked party? She said, yes, we all walk in naked. I said, you mean like that? She said, yes, Leymah, like that. And everybody is looking at everyone going like this. She said, yes. It didn't make any sense to me. But apparently, only the cool ones got invited to that naked party. And then you hear stories of girls who have to hook up. I'm sure people here know what hooking up is. College students, I got your drift. Hooking up is part of the culture. And then sadly, you have very smart girls, but because the culture is driven towards sex and sexuality and violence, because this kind of sex is not civilized sex like our parents taught us. And so because it's driven towards this way, the smart ones have to pretend to be stupid because they need to be accepted. And every time you think, how did we get to this place? What can be done? Is there any remedy for this situation? In some cases, yes. In other cases, unfortunately, no. The Mary child I mentioned earlier later died of complication due to rape and was buried by the government of Liberia. To date, the case was never taken to court. Her father made his statement at the police station when his father-in-law was arrested. And he told the police, my daughter is a known liar, and she's an ingrate, and we have no space for her in our family. That's how she came to my house. Olivia, the second victim, even though it's a high-profile case, the uncle has never been convicted nor arrested. Her mother had been ostracized by the family members because she dared to go public with a family matter. The cases of these little girls, unfortunately, is neither the first nor the last. Over the last few months in Liberia, we hear horrifying tales of rape. Not only is it unfortunate, it is sad and barbaric. The women in Totota told the delegation that the constant request from police officers for money from victims and their families to help with logistics make many parents to think twice before pursuing justice. Most parents decide to let go and spend their meager resources on treating the medical complications their children have developed. Some would say we need laws and infrastructure to deal with these issues. This is true, but sometimes laws and infrastructures don't really help at all. In 2003 in Liberia, the Association of Female Lawyers drafted the rape bill. After months of lobbying Parliament, it was passed into law by our Transitional Assembly in 2005. The law was subsequently signed into law by the then Transitional President, Charles Judy Bryant. This particular law is the strongest in all of West Africa, and probably the only rape law in West Africa. Rape is a non-bailable offense, and it has a sentence from 12 years to life. In 2009, President Sirleaf mandated the establishment of a special court on rape. This court was set up, a judge and a prosecution team were appointed. Many of us activists rejoiced and celebrated because, in our opinion, Cases of rape and abuse will be fast-tracked and it would deter would-be perpetrators. In February of this year, the hype and the hope about that court dropped. The judge told journalists that they had dropped 280 cases due to lack of evidence. She proceeded to lash out at victims and their families, calling it a total embarrassment to the courts and to the accused, being dragged to a place when they had no evidence. So what do? It is like there's an urgency, and not much seems to be working. The story of a young woman gang raped in South Africa and degutted a few weeks ago. She was raped by friends and roommates of her brother from school and split open from her vagina up to her mouth. She lived long enough to identify her attackers. What can we do? It's urgent. In some parts of the world, they say it's more dangerous to be a woman than to be a soldier. In 2009, we went to Cape Town, a group of us very sassy girls, and we spent time exhaling and sharing crazy stories. A human rights activist in Zimbabwe told us the story of a mother who, while she was on her farm working, thought her child was playing, heard some funny noises, and she walked towards the noise, and saw this man raping her little daughter. She took a knife, the knife she had in her hand, grabbed his private, cut it off, and threw it so far away, it made it impossible for anyone to find it and stitch it back. He ran for help and was taken to the hospital, and the police came and arrested her for assault. This enraged the women's rights community, and every available female lawyer made herself available, and the case was later dropped. This seems like a very good alternative, especially when you're the devil wearing Prada, but it's not the best. I believe a way forward for us is dialogue with community members. Us, activists, need to open up our space and invite men to journey with us. A few weeks ago, I went to a funeral in Monrovia, and there was a member of parliament who is known for